For over 40 years, attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome to Justice for You, where we talk about what you need to know if you have been injured or if you are being denied justice. Tonight I have my good friend Kent Hunt back with me to talk about automobile accidents. Kent, thanks for joining me again.
Thank you for having me, Chip. I always look forward to these conversations and I always learn a lot from them.
I look forward to them too. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about automobile accidents for the next two shows. We have talked a little bit about automobile accidents in the past, but not specifically on that topic. So the next two shows we're going to dedicate to talking about automobile accidents, something that every person may have to deal with at some point in time in the future. First, we want to talk about some of the important things you need to know about automobile insurance. There are two basic kinds of automobile insurance that we want to talk about tonight. The first is liability insurance, and the second is uninsured motorist insurance.
Chip, could I ask a question before you get started on that? And
Absolutely.
Am I right in my thinking on this? Is it required in Alabama that all licensed vehicle operators have insurance, automobile insurance?
It is a requirement under Alabama law that all people who drive a vehicle must have automobile liability insurance. Unfortunately, some people drive without insurance. And that becomes a real problem if you have been injured in a wreck where a person with no liability insurance coverage is at fault. And so that's really why, Kent, we want to talk tonight about both liability insurance, but also uninsured motorist insurance.
Chip, do all policies include uninsured motorist coverage?
All policies are required to include uninsured motorist coverage. However, a policyholder, when you buy your liability coverage, you have the right to decline uninsured motorist coverage. So you can tell the agent, or when you sign up for the insurance, you can check a blank that says, I do not want uninsured motorist coverage. In Alabama, the only way you can get out of having uninsured motorist coverage is to sign a form saying you do not want it. But let me just say this, Kent, people should have uninsured motorist coverage, and I think that when the ladies and gentlemen understand what it is and what it does, they will agree with me.
Is there a limit on the uninsured motorist insurance that we should be concerned about when you get into the details of that?
Well, you know, in Alabama, in a liability insurance policy, you must have at least $25,000 worth of liability insurance. Liability insurance goes to protect the party that's been injured if the policyholder or if you are at fault in the accident. In Alabama, there's not a maximum amount of uninsured motorist coverage that you can have, although some insurance companies will not sell you more than a certain amount. For example, if you have a $25,000 liability insurance policy that covers you while you're driving your car, you probably will have a $25,000 uninsured motorist limit, but you really need more than $25,000. And if we don't have time to talk about that in this segment, Kent, we'll talk about it a little bit further.
Okay.
We've been given a call to a break at this point in time, but let me just say this. I want you to have uninsured motorist coverage. We all have to have liability coverage. That protects other people. I want you to have uninsured motorist coverage because it protects you, and that's why we recommend it. Thank you for watching Justice for You. It's time for a short break, but once we return, we will have more on automobile accidents. Thanks a lot.
Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. Some people say personal injury law is all about the money. Well, they're right. It's about the money to provide a bionic hand to a young man who has lost one of his in an accident. It's about the money for a family who has lost a mother due to a drunk driver. Yes, for the law offices of Chip Nix, it is about the money. It's about the money to help people salvage a decent life from the wreckage of someone else's carelessness. Justice for you begins here.
For over 40 years, attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome back to Justice for You. Our topic this evening is automobile accidents. My guest is moderator Kent Hunt. Thank you, Kent, again for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Chip. It's my honor to be here with you. And if you were talking about, when we went to break, you were talking about uninsured motorist coverage and liability coverage. Could you go into the distinctions between the two just a little bit for us?
Absolutely. So liability coverage protects you as the policyholder. If you're driving a vehicle and you run a red light and you hit somebody, then your liability insurance coverage will take over and they will try to settle that case for you, or if you get sued in the case, they will defend you in the case. Uninsured motorist coverage, though, protects you. Let's say you are traveling through an intersection and somebody else runs the red light and hits you. And let's further assume that the person that hits you does not have any liability insurance, and that happens all too often. We see it all the time, unfortunately. Well, what are you going to do? The at-fault party, the person that ran the red light, doesn't have any liability insurance and probably would not be able to pay a judgment. What do you do? Well, if you have uninsured motorist coverage, all you do is file a claim with your insurance company. You explain that the at-fault driver did not have liability coverage, and then your insurance company takes over and adjusts that claim and compensates you for your injuries up to the limits of the uninsured motorist coverage. There's one other aspect of it I want to tell you about. That is the aspect called underinsured motorist coverage. So we have uninsured motorist coverage. That's when the person at fault does not have any liability coverage. We also have underinsured. Assume that the person that hits you going through the intersection only has a $25,000 liability limit on the liability coverage. If your injuries, let's say your medical bills total $25,000, well, there's not enough money in the $25,000 liability limit to really pay you for your damages. So if that happens, you can turn the claim over to your own insurance carrier under your uninsured/underinsured policy, and they will again come in and they will adjust the claim. You would get the $25,000 liability limit from the person at fault, but you would also receive money from your own insurance carrier. And what we tell people all the time is get as much uninsured motorist coverage as you can, because it protects you and your family, and it's not all that expensive. You do have to pay an extra premium for it, but it's not all that expensive.
Chip, how would someone like me, how do I find out how much uninsured motorist coverage would be available to me?
Well, you should talk to an agent, an insurance agent. I don't know how everybody buys their insurance. Some people are buying it online now. We still use the old-fashioned agent. Call my agent and tell him I got a car and that I need coverage. But you just need to ask your agent, here is my situation, this is how much liability coverage I want, how much underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage can I get?
All right, now I always ask you this, and it's where I learn the most, and that's when you give us a case example of it. Do you have a case example that you could throw in for us?
I just happen to have a case example for everybody. This is a very interesting case, and it was a tragic case. Happened south of Montgomery on US Highway 231. There was a group of young people, college-age young people, that were traveling from East Georgia down to the beach, and they came through Montgomery. Well, a young lady was driving, and they got south of Montgomery on 231, and they needed to stop. So they took a left across the median to a service station, and they stopped and got gas, and they got something to drink, and then they got back on their way. Well, unfortunately, the young lady driving got confused, and when she turned out of the station, she turned north instead of south. So what she was doing was actually going back in the opposite direction from where she wanted to go. Well, she realized it, and she saw a median up ahead on the left. She was in the far right-hand lane of travel, and she suddenly turned the steering wheel sharply to send the vehicle she was driving across to the median, which was right upon them. And there was an 18-wheeler coming in the far left-hand lane, and it hit them broadside, and it was a terrible wreck and a terrible situation.
So talk to us a little bit about the liability in that particular situation, how those other items you talked to us about played out in that particular accident.
All right. The first question would be, whose liability insurance policy would be invoked? Well, there are two possibilities, and actually we filed suit on both of these possibilities. One is the young lady driving the car who cut across could be sued, or a claim could be filed on her insurance for what we call a tort, negligence or wantonness. So her liability insurance company would come into play. Additionally, if the truck was negligent in any way. And I know it's hard to imagine a scenario when the truck might be negligent, but there are some situations. For example, if the trucker, the 18-wheeler driver, was traveling too fast for the conditions, then he might be partially liable too. So you would file a claim against both of the insurance carriers involved for those parties. Now there's a problem with that, and this gets into the complexities of automobile litigation, and this is the problem. The young lady that was driving had her passengers in her car. I represent one of the passengers. She can be sued for negligence and wantonness, but there is something in Alabama called the guest statute. And this is what the guest statute says. It says if you are riding in a car with somebody who's driving, and you are a social guest, just a pure guest, then the only way you can recover from the driver in the event of an accident is to prove that that driver was not merely negligent, but was wanton in the way she drove. What is negligence and what is wantonness? Negligence is the failure to exercise reasonable care. Wantonness, however, is the reckless, willful, or intentional doing of an act with knowledge that the act is likely to cause injury to another person. So you can see the huge difference in those two theories.
I just can't help but say this. It doesn't take very long. It doesn't take us very far. We don't have to get very far along in the program to get to the point that we usually end up on, and that is that everything is complex nowadays, isn't it?
Nowadays, everything is complex, and the guest statute makes it really complex for people who have been injured in the car of someone who's driving them around. You know, how do you prove liability if you've got to show wantonness, which is a very high standard, as opposed to negligence?
Did you guest statute? Is there a way to get around that?
Oh yeah, so that's, I'm glad you asked that, because that's really what I wanted to talk about. There are ways to get around it. The first way would be to show that at the beginning of the ride, the person who was driving misstated something to you that caused you to rely on that statement and caused you to get into the vehicle with them. Let me give you an example of that. I had, this is a different case, but in this case, a number of people were riding around. They decided to go riding at midnight. They had been drinking beer, and so the driver of the vehicle got in the vehicle, and then he had 3 passengers. And one of the passengers said, before I go with you to ride around drinking beer, I want to know if you're all right. Are you drunk? Have you been drinking too much? Is it safe for me to get in your vehicle? And he said, yeah, I've only had a couple of beers, I'm fine. Well, you know what happened. They went along and they had a wreck. This young man ran off the road, the car flipped, and 3 people in the car were seriously injured. When it came time to look at his blood alcohol, it was more than double the limit. So he had misrepresented to the people in the car with him, who relied on the fact that he was all right to drive. And that is one way to get around the guest statute. You don't have to worry about the guest statute if somebody entices you into the vehicle falsely. Another way to get around the guest statute is this. In this particular instance where these people were riding around late at night, one of the young ladies said, let me out or take me back. I'm scared. You're scaring me to death. Let me out or take me back. And this driver refused to do that. So in that instance, the case law in Alabama says the guest statute does not apply if you try to get away from the driver. The third situation how you can get around the guest statute is this way. In the example of the young lady that made the sharp turn across the 4-lane highway with the people riding with her, they had been together. They were friends, and they all contributed to the gas. They contributed to the oil. They were going to one of the person's beach houses to stay, and so they were involved in a joint venture. It was more like a business relationship. They were on a social trip, but it was more of a business relationship. That is the other way to get around the guest statute. I'm so sorry that we're running out. It seems like these things go fast, too fast, but we need to close it out for this segment. We'll come back. Let's take a short break. You're watching Justice for You. We've got more after this.
Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. I'm attorney Chip Nix, host of Justice for You. Justice for You applies not only to the clients we serve, but also to the community. At nixattorney.com, we provide answers to questions about personal injury with direct access to me and my associates. If you've been injured, contact me at 334-279-7770. Justice for You starts here. We're back with Justice for You, and our guest is Kent Hunt.
Chip, when we left for break, we were talking about the guest statute, which limits liability on the operator of the vehicle, and you also talked about some ways to get around the guest statute. But that whole discussion was aimed at trying to determine where liability rests. And the liability we're talking about is for injuries that occur in automobile accidents primarily.
Right.
Could you talk about some of those common injuries that you've seen?
Absolutely. There are a couple of things you have to prove. The first one is liability. If you cannot prove liability on the other party, then you cannot recover. However, if you can prove liability, then the next thing to do is to put on evidence or to show the insurance company what the injuries were. In the case that I was just talking about, one of the people injured in the car sustained a spinal injury. The injury was that she had fractures at 3 levels of her lumbar or lower spine. The fractures caused what we call the transverse process to break off from her spine. So you can see that's a serious injury. It's something that we have to take into consideration. We have to learn about that injury if we've never had anybody, another client that have had that injury before, and I've had others that have had that injury. We have to make sure we understand what kind of doctors need to be treating the person, what types of treatments. We need to understand all of that to be able to explain it and to help our client with it. The other kind of injury that this young lady sustained was what we call a closed head injury. This vehicle overturned and rolled several times. She was hit in the head. It caused her brain inside the head to kind of slosh around. It was a bad impact. And so she had to have treatment for that as well. And the treatment for those injuries frequently have to be diagnosed or have to be determined by someone called a neuropsychologist or a neuropsychiatrist. A neuropsychiatrist can pinpoint what the injuries are and help you determine treatment for them.
Chip, see, we talked about the brain injury, those kind of things, and we talked about the team. Can you tell us a little bit about the team that you have access to help you determine those?
Absolutely. I've been doing this for 45 years, and over the course of that time, I have come to know many very fine physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, physical therapists, other people who treat the various types of injuries that our clients sustain. It takes a team, it takes a lot of work, hard work. You've got to pay attention to detail. And so we do that. We take care of our clients. We try to make sure there are no loose ends when we finish a case. For example, if an insurance company has paid for medical bills, we make sure that any subrogation interest, that is, the right to get their medical payments back, is taken care of, and we take care of all of that.
As is always the case too, I remember, and everybody else should also, that if you're involved in an automobile accident, anytime, but particularly if there's a physical injury, you got to remember that nobody's looking out for the interest of you like an attorney would if you had your own attorney defending you in that particular case.
That's absolutely right. I had someone recently ask me what the most important characteristic is of an attorney that you hire. And the answer to that question is experience. You need somebody that knows. Kent, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You can watch Justice for You Sunday nights after the news at 10. If you've been injured in an accident or at work, call me at 334-279-7770. Have a good night.